my friends, and a very warm welcome back to my painting channel. I'm sorry that I've been absent for a little while. There's been a few things going on with work, and also one of my cameras have broke, so I found it a little bit difficult to record a lot of my painting. But luckily I've replaced one of the cameras and I'm back at it now. And in this painting video, I'm going to be painting a squad of 5 classic Imperial Stormtroopers for the Star Wars Legion game. So what I've got here is a squad of 5 guys. So I've got the rocket launcher, the heavy machine gunner, the squad leader, and then 2 normal troopers. And I've base coated these using a white base spray. So I've used a white primer for these because we're going to build white up onto white. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to start by using a tenebrous grey. Now if you don't use AK and you just want to use black, that's absolutely fine as well. And pretty much what I'm going to try and do is we're going to build up all of the darker areas because these are quite difficult to reach. We're going to build up all of these darker areas sort of in between the arms, where the elbows are, where the knees are, underneath the armpits and things like that. And we're going to paint all these black bits in. We're going to try and be as careful as possible when doing this. It doesn't matter too much if you make mistakes. This is why we're doing this part first, because we're going to build up on top of these and we're going to build up the layers a little bit later anyway. We're going to try and be as careful as possible because you don't want to make too much work for yourself a little bit later. So yeah, like I say, I'm painting all of these black bits first because these are really difficult to reach later on otherwise. So yeah, just trying to be careful with these. Now, although I'm going to be painting all of the harder to reach areas, some of the other parts to paint as well are things like the weapons, and also a little bit around the visor and a little bit around the helmet in some of the details, just the gas mask kind of breathing apparatus on the front of the helmet, just on the front of the face mask. And as I say, just doing all of the weapons as well. Again, trying to be careful. Doesn't matter if you're making too many mistakes, and this is going to be a little bit of a messy sort of stage anyway, because this is quite difficult to kind of see where all of those components are. You will make a few mistakes and you will get black on the parts that maybe you don't want it there, but that's fine because we'll fix all of that later anyway. Now with the backpack on the heavy machine gunner, that's a little bit different. I've seen a few different pictures of this thing, so some of them show it where it's completely black, some show it where it's completely white, and all these different things. So what I've decided to do for this video is I'm going to paint it a few different colours and kind of build up a little bit of a cool sort of difference in character, and we'll see how we go, and we'll show you sort of towards the end. It's going to look really great. So I'm also going to paint up the rocket launcher as well, and I'm going to paint all of this black, including the little rest part that sits on the shoulder, and of course the scope and all of those bits. I'm just going to paint the whole thing. Now the drawback with painting sort of Stormtroopers is a lot of it is white, but also there's black parts to them as well. So what we're going to try and do is add a few extra colours to kind of make it a little bit more interesting. Now, the biggest trick that I can give you in terms of painting white, or the biggest advice that I can give you in terms of painting white, is instead of painting straight white, is to build up from light grey. So I'm starting off with a ghost grey from Vallejo, and I find this colour to be a really great base colour, because it's light enough that it allows you to have a really nice bright tone to begin with, but it's also just a little bit off-white enough that when you start adding whites and adding lighter colours to it, it does build a lot more highlight from it as well. So instead of painting white directly onto white, what you're kind of doing is you're going to paint white on top of grey, and this is going to create a really interesting sort of tone and texture and contrast without needing to go too extreme or have too many different colours, or worry about how you're going to get the white on top of white, because white is already so bright anyway. So like I say, the best tip and the biggest trick that I can tell you is to paint a very light shade of grey first, so something like this ghost grey, which is fantastic, and then build up from there. And by doing that, you create those highlights then. But we'll show you as we go. So I'm pretty much now covering all of the model in this ghost grey, and the only thing I'm doing is I'm just going to avoid painting this on any of the black areas where the tenebrous grey is. And then I'm going to use a wash. Now for this wash you've got a few different choices. For me, I'm using a Vallejo pale grey wash, and this is a really fantastic wash because this is exactly what it says on the tub. This is a pale grey colour. So this is going to give you depth, and it's going to create a little bit of an element of shadowing, but without darkening the model down too much. So what that's giving you is it's giving you the ability to create sort of shadows in by all of the creases, but without it turning black. Okay, so once all of that's dry, we're going to move on, and we're just going to use a little bit of an off-white. So I'm using, for this one, I'm using the AK Interactive off-white colour. And this is a great colour to start building that tone back up. Now, if you normally watch me paint and you stick to the Vallejo sort of paint sets, that's fine. That's all I would say is mix sort of a half and half ghost grey with a dead white together, and that should give you a kind of off-white colour as well, and that would be a perfect highlight. But for this I'm using the AK Interactive off-white, and as you can see I'm going to paint those panels, but I'm going to try and leave where that pale grey is sitting just in those grooves of the panel. So I'm painting on top of the panels, but just leaving that shade just in the little creases and in the little folds. I'm going to do the same thing with the helmet as well. So you can see I'm going to paint this off-white around the face mask, but I'm waiting and I'm leaving where the shade, that pale grey shade, has just rested in all of those little recess points and all those little gaps and all those little creases. And this is what's going to give you the tone, because as we're starting to build this up, this is what's going to separate it between the shadowy white to the bright white, you see. So we're not actually painting white on white. Essentially, we're painting grey, then a darker grey, then an off-white, and then we'll highlight white as well, and this will look really, really, really cool. I'm just showing you sort of an extended point of me painting the white here, just so you get a feel for how I'm painting all of these panels, and how to just kind of carefully select where you paint in this highlight colour as well. Because the last thing you want to do is paint this directly over the top of everything and then lose that depth and texture. That's not what we want to do. As you can see, I'm just trying to be careful and painting this up in a nice line in between the sort of the forearm guard here, so that it does leave that shade just in between those creases as well. We're going to do the same thing across all of the panels. Now, because these Stormtroopers are covered entirely in this sort of white tone, this sort of white colour, this is going to be the majority of your painting. So it does benefit you to take a little bit of time just to paint each of these panels. And again, as I normally say, it's always good to have sort of a nice thin colour as well. So I normally mix these colours in with a little bit of water. Technically, normally I do sort of like about 50-50, so I just water them down quite a bit so that they move onto the miniature quite well, and it's easy to manipulate that paint then as well. And also you can remove it if you make any mistakes and things like that. So as you can see, I'm just painting those panels in, but again I'm just leaving the creased areas on that armour panel where the shade is sat. And that is the most important part when you're building these up, is you can build these highlights and build the tones up as much as you like, as long as you're leaving those sort of little bits of the shade in the darker points. Then that'll kind of give you the depth and give you the contrast to the extreme white that these Stormtroopers look. Now the cool thing is, you can't, if you wanted to, you don't have to use the pale grey wash. If you've got something like a Nuln Oil, you can use that, and I'll show you what it looks like with a black wash later. So once we've done the off-white, we're going to move on to using white. So I'm using again the AK Interactive, and this is an intense range, so this has got a lot of vibrancy to it, and that's the point, is we want to try and pick a colour that has really nice vibrancy, and then just pick out areas on those armour panels where we want this nice vibrant white to shine. And this is going to give our Stormtrooper the most extreme sort of highlight that we can give him. Now if you wanted to, you could build this up in stages. So you could go half stops in between. So when you repainted with the ghost grey, then went down with the shade, you could put the ghost grey back on first instead of going straight to the off-white. But you could also then go sort of the off-white to white, half and half, then then up to white, instead of going up in one full stop. But that's completely up to you. It depends on how long you want to spend on each Stormtrooper. And because normally with these guys we're going to be painting them in quite big batches, I figured sort of doing 2 or 3 colours per Stormtrooper would be quite enough to get them sort of tabletop ready, or even a little bit better, and get them looking quite showy. So again, as you can see, I'm trying to be as careful as possible by painting all of these panels in and all of these armour panels in using that white colour. Now, as I was saying earlier, you can see where the shade is, but the shade isn't too extreme, so it's not darkening the miniature down. And that way, in those little shaded points where the armour panels are, We're not getting extreme sort of black shades and extreme darker points as well. And this is great because this is adding to the effect that the Stormtrooper is wearing white rather than sort of black and white then, if that makes sense. So a little bit later, I did paint one using Null Oil, and a little bit later I'll show you sort of the contrast between the two. So, like I said earlier about mixing a few different colours together to kind of create a little bit more character to these, what I'm going to do, using the heavy gunner, so the guy that has the really big sort of machine gun type thing, we're going to use the dark grey colour, and we're just going to use this to paint parts of that backpack. So we're going to paint some of these details in, and we're going to use this really dark grey. And the reason why we're doing that is so that it just takes a little bit of your eye away from all of that white, so that it just gives you a little bit of something else to look at, and it creates a little bit more character and a little bit more depth to this particular model. Like I say, you could paint it all black and white if you want to. If you want to stick strictly to the sort of traditional colours, you can do. But for me, I just wanted to paint a few tiny little bits here and there, so slightly different colours, just so that it takes your eye away from all of that white and creates a little bit more for you to look at. So as you can see, I'm just painting these panels here, and I'm painting a few of these little doohickeys on the back and some of these little points here and there. I don't know what they're actually called, so I'm just painting these little bits, these little details and things like that. And like I say, I'm just using the dark grey for this one. And then we'll build up a highlight of a nice blue-grey pale. And this is one of my favourite sort of highlighting colours to a dark grey colour, because this does have a slight blue tinge to it, so it's not a flat grey as such, it does have a little bit more of a tone to it. And pretty much that's all we're going to do is just a little bit of kind of like edge highlighting / dry brushing on this. So I'm just going around the edges of the backpack, as you can see, just around the square points, and then just sort of almost like a light dry brushing down this little sort of pump on the back, and just along the edges as well. I'm trying to dry brush a little bit of the detailing back in. Nothing too fancy, nothing over the top, something that is nice and easy to get these models on the tabletop and, you know, get them ready to play the game. So as you can see, just picking up some of those details across the back there. Just dry brushing a little bit more depth across these panels, just like so. So something nice and quick and easy. Now I also have a box here of the floor experience from scale 75. So these are really extremely vibrant colours, and I've been looking for an excuse to use these on all different kinds of things for ages. So I'm just going to paint and use these little extreme sort of vibrant colours to just paint some of the lights and little bits on the back of the backpack here. And you can also use these to do things like painting things like the bazooka, so the guy with the rocket launcher. It's got a little sort of computer panel on the back, so you can use the blue or the little red for the guidance and things like that on the front and bits like that. And it's a really cool effect. Now for the squad leader's shoulder pad. Now I've looked into a lot of different types of shoulder pads in a lot of different colours, and each colour means a different thing. Now to stick more to tradition and stick into sort of the shoulder pads that you see quite often in the movies and the sort of shoulder pad that the classic Stormtroopers wear, I'm just using this orange-brown colour for this, because this then is, as far as I can tell by looking online, this gives this guy the rank of squad leader, which is kind of fit in for the fact that we paint in a 5-man squad. So we've got, you know, the 2 heavy gunners, and then we've got the squad leader himself, so it fits and it suits. So that's what we're going to paint. We're just going to keep that shoulder pad this nice orange-brown. Now once the orange brown is dry, that's all I'm going to do is just add a slight edge highlight of a little bit of a mixture of orange brown and bone white together. And this is pretty much just about a 50-50, so half and half split, and that should give you a nice natural light highlight and high tone. And once I've done the edge highlight, I'm also dragging the very tip of my brush just across the edges, just to kind of make it look a little bit more worn and a little bit more detailed, so that it looks like we've got a few scratches and scrapes, just to kind of give the officer a little bit of a look as if he's kind of been through a few different things. So he's got a little bit of experience. He's not a green officer. This guy, he knows what he's doing, you know. Now from there, again, like I was saying, from all of the bits of research and things that I've done, a lot of sort of like the leathers and the things that the guns sit in tend to also be black. So instead of painting these black, I've just gone to mix in a little bit of a darker color. So what I'm kind of looking for is I'm trying to do like leathers, and again it's just to take your eye away from that black-white combination. So for this one I'm using a flat brown color, and I'm just using this as the base color, and then we're going to build this back up, and then we're going to make scratches and bumps and things like that, again just to make it look a little bit more worn. So we're basing it with that flat brown color, and then we're going to use the first highlight, which is a nice mahogany brown. This is a nice natural color which has a really great highlight to that original flat brown. And we're just going to use really scratchy sort of brush strokes for this, because we don't want it to look too neat, we don't want it to look really perfect, we want this to be like a worn out leather colour, so that it looks like it's been worn, it's been used. Like I said, this officer, he's got a bit of skill, he's got a bit of experience behind him, he's not green, you know, he knows what he's doing. So using those scratchy brush strokes, or if you're used to it, you can use a stippling effect too, and that would also give you a really cool effect. So for the second highlight, I'm using that mahogany brown again, but I'm mixing in a little bit of that bone white again, just like we did with the shoulder pad, and that's all we're doing is mixing a half and half, so 50% each again. And again we're going for those scratchy sort of one direction kind of paint strokes or brush strokes. And again, if you're used to doing your stippling, as you can see, I'm just stippling a little bit of texture here and there, just so that it breaks up that flat color there. It gives you something to look at. It pulls your eye away from that monotone sort of black and white color as well. So for a final sort of highlight, I'm using this Vampiric Flesh, again from the AK Interactive. This is a fantastic color, and what I've done is I've watered this down quite a lot, and I'm using a really extreme detail brush. And that's all I'm going to do is use a very fine mixture of stippling effects, and also just using it to create scratches and sort of rough marks and things like that, just across this leather, so that the leather looks like it's had a little bit of a beating, it's worn down, it's been used a lot. You know, this officer, he takes his gun out of his holster quite a bit. Whether he hits anything when he shoots or not is another matter. But yeah, he doesn't take very good care of this leather pouch, or rather it's been well worn from a lot of different battles. So it looks pretty cool. Now from there, that's all I'm going to do then is I'm going to use a really, and I can't stress enough, really light bit of dry brushing. And pretty much that's all I'm doing is I'm putting a little bit of gunmetal onto my brush, and I'm making sure that there's almost no color left on that brush, so there's almost no paint left on that brush. And that's all I'm doing is just using a controlled light dry brushing, as you can see here. And I'm doing this just so that, again, it makes it look like these weapons are a little bit worn out. So these weapons have been used. These troopers have been in combat. These aren't fresh off the ship, brand new troopers. These guys have had a few battles and they kind of know what they're doing, you know? So this is just a nice, simple, easy way of kind of making these weapons look a little bit worn. Now, looking into as much research as possible, a lot of the weapons tend to look black anyway, so I'm just kind of trying to build them up that way. So as I said to you earlier, I was going to show you sort of the mixture and the combination of what black wash would look like versus the grey. The black wash, the Null Nile, is actually the guy on the left, and you can see how much more cartooned the effect looks and how much darker it looks. Whereas the light grey wash, you can see kind of has a more natural sort of tone to the white. So that creates a little bit of shadowing, but not too extreme. Our squad of 5 troopers, all painted up, nice and bright and vibrant in white, but also with a few just tiny little details in colours just to make them look a little bit unique, a little bit different, and make them look cool. All in all, I think this little video has turned out really nice. I think the troopers look great together. You'll have to let me know what you think of the troopers in the comments below. As always, my friends, thank you so much for tuning in, for watching, for your support, and of course for your comments. And I will see you on the next one.